So now we're going to talk about what's involved in creating a discussion guide. And this discussion guide is a super important part of market research if you're conducting focus groups or any sort of live session, or it can be online or in person. This conversation is going to assume that we're going to be doing a focus group in person, and that we're going to be testing products during the time of what's likely to be a 90-minute group. So for this example, I'm going to use a hypothetical lollipop flavor test. Can't say I've personally done any focus groups in the lollipop category, but I just wanted to use it to illustrate the kind of questions that we'd be asking if we were in this focus group setting and trying, say, 4 different lollipops. At the top of a focus group guide, there are a few things you'll notice. Now, if we're in person and I have a printed guide, I don't want to have the client or the brand revealed because someone might see it. So it's, by design, not on any guide that I'm going to print. And I like to put the objectives on the guide, not because I forget them, but it helps me and anyone in the back room or watching via Zoom know that these are the objectives. It's important also to realize this is a guide, it's not a Bible. So when you're looking at a guide, it's likely to be that there are going to be some questions that are getting skipped. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just is just the nature of the time that we have. We're likely not to get every single question. And the reason for using a professional moderator is so that he or she can assess when to go slightly off topic and when to bring things back to the focus. So assuming you're looking at 4 different flavors, you'll have abbreviations. You're not going to want to say it's honeydew where, people are going to be trying honeydew. You want them to find it for themselves. Some people use numbers, some people use letters or the first letter of the name. I personally use the last letter of the name just because I don't want it to be readily discernible to participants. And I don't like to use numbers or letters because it tends to imply some hierarchy of some things being better than others. Don't want that either. Then you're looking at rotation. So in 2 groups, it's going to be a pretty easy rotation. Sometimes we do 6 groups and then it gets a little bit more complicated. So how do we start the groups? If you've seen any focus groups, the moderator will explain his role in guiding the session, explain the issues relating to privacy, confidentiality, video recording. If we're in a facility, there might be a one-way mirror, and just confirming the things that are in place, like having had a signed non-disclosure agreement. He or she'll talk about the rules, the no right or wrong answers, that that moderator is independent and doesn't work directly for the company sponsoring the research, to encourage participation, and just be clear, concise, direct, and not feel like you have to self-censor. So usually for product testing, there are some protocols. Some people use crackers, some people use water, and I've spoken to people who are olfactory specialists about their opinion. For my particular purposes, I just use water. But that's something to your discretion. There just hasn't been a lot of evidence that for most things that it necessitates the crackers or things that we used to do to clear the palate. Depending on what it is, might do a demonstration, as simplified as, removing the lollipop from the wrapper, observing, touch, and smelling the lollipop, trying it as you would typically and putting it down at the end. I'll usually have rating sheets, and we try to minimize bias. So sometimes I'll ask people to kind of, keep their initial audible or visible reactions on their face to a minimum. But from an entertainment point of view and videotaping, obviously those are great. But from a research objectivity, we do try to make sure that um, that there's no more bias than there is, which is the nature of the focus groups. There's pros and cons between in-depth interviews and focus groups for that reason. Sometimes we'll do an introduction. Some people will ask about, some moderators will typically ask who's at home or family or what have you. I personally don't like to make people feel potentially uncomfortable about what their situation at home is. So I find that introductions that tie into the topic of the research are more helpful and less controversial, less likely to make someone feel self-conscious or uncomfortable, which defeats the whole purpose of an intro. And also, I like to make sure that whatever we're talking about is relevant and could provide insights to clients. One of my fundamental goals is that when a client hires me, is that I treat that client's budget as if it was my own. So you're not going to see frivolous expenses or fine dining or ridiculous prices for copies or like that's just not my style. Um, but that's another conversation. So product testing. If you have 4 things in a 90-minute group, we might say like, let's, divide it up, give time for the front end and the back end, but spend a certain amount of time on a product. But again, that too is variable. And the kind of questions that we're likely to get into are overall impressions, what you liked, what you didn't like, um, purchase likelihood based on the experience. And oftentimes you'll see a paper easel or a whiteboard or something where that data is collected, because oftentimes the clients are observing in the back room, and it also makes it easier for me on the analysis side to kind of see how things are proceeding. Also, even though ideally everyone would speak equally and you'd get a sense of everyone's opinions, some people talk more than others. And so I'd hate for someone who's a little more shy or introverted to not get their views visible and articulated, just because maybe some of the other participants are louder. Especially if we're looking at packaging, we might ask something about the wrapper, or what they experienced, or how it felt. But this particular focus group discussion guide is mostly focused on flavor. And so I might ask questions about how it compares to others and flavor intensity, and how they might describe it to someone else. And then we repeat it for the remaining products. Now, even though this is qualitative research and we don't report things quantitatively, like with charts and tables and so forth, we might use things that feel quantitative, like ranking, just to get a sense of where things fall. So I might tally the rankings that people have, and then ask the group questions based on those rankings about what led to them and what they liked or didn't like. Was there a mouthfeel or an artificiality of the flavor or an aftertaste or something that affected the decisions they made? And then we'll generally have a wrap up and have people reflect, especially if it's the first group of a project. I want to make sure that there isn't something that should have been covered. And I'm the kind of moderator who leaves a pretty larger than average gap between the first and second group, because I like to be able to pivot if there are learnings that I have or that the client has from the first group that might affect the kind of questions that we want to ask next. And then we'll wrap it up. They'll get paid. We'll turn off the video recording and go from there. But if you come to a project having understood what a guide looks like, that'll make the conversation a lot easier. My goal here is to help you understand what the questions are, the kind of questions that we are, so that we can save time and you get the most bang for your buck when you're working with a, qualitative research vendor on designing your guide. This 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 whole series is really about empowering you to understand and make decisions and learn, because I'm passionate about market research, and I want my clients to be able to feel that and learn from it and know that we're always striving for continuous improvement. So I hope that helps.